You are listening to the Agree to Disagree program on the newamericanmedia.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. It is, I don't know, in a way it's kind of the beginning of a week for us here when we start this portion of the show. It's almost like, all right, well, we've waited all week to kind of get on with it, and here we are. We're halfway in, finishing our sports show, The Unhappy Hour. Thank you very much for participating in that program as we talked sports, and now we're on Agree to Disagree here at the newamericanmedia.com. We had a really cool show last week with Dr. Jose Jaramillo, who talked to us about 2012 and the Mayans and the Mayan calendar, and it was a split show. The other half was Pasha Roberts, who is the director of Silver Circle movie, who, long story short, they gave a silver round, a silver coin that they produced to Ron Paul, who then had a meeting with Ben Bernanke at the Federal Reserve, explaining that silver holds its value and their paper dollars have not. So it was interesting getting their take on just how small the world is. You know, there's this photo of Ron Paul holding up this coin, showing Ben Bernanke, showing him the difference between paper money and things that can hold on to their value. So it's interesting. And we hope that you check those out. We have logged them over at youtube.com/thenewamericanmedia. We also have our interview with Buddy Roemer, independent candidate for 2012 president. He was one of our guests a couple of weeks ago. So that is logged over there. We want you to go take a look, take a listen, leave some comments, send it to your friends. We certainly appreciate it because we really can't do this without you. So without any further ado, we are going to call and bring Mr. John B. Wells into the program. Let's see if we get him.
Hello, you've reached John B. Wells International Studios and offices and the Caravan to Midnight. If you don't mind, please leave your details, including a telephone number, and please say that telephone number twice after the following signal. One of us will contact you at the very first chance. Thanks.
You know, even just listening to that gentleman's voice on a voicemail is great. He seriously has one of the most interesting, pure radio voices that you're going to find. And there's no way that I could try to imitate that. I couldn't do it well, anyway. I've heard George Norrie talk about having his radio moments. He's been doing radio for a long time, and how in the early days he was trying to have the radio voice. I don't even know if I can fake a good radio voice. I just talk. That's all I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to use my brain. So what we can do now is we can try Mr. John B. Wells again, and then we can try him on his other line. So we'll give this another shot here. Let's see what happens, folks. Drum roll, please.
Hello.
Hello, John. This is Brian with the newamericanmedia.com. You are live, sir. How are you doing today?
Well, excellent. It's good to talk to you, Brian. How are you, sir?
I'm living the dream. Thank you very much. I was just explaining to the listeners out there a little bit of who you were, but I guess let's start with Coast to Coast and how we've recently been able to find you broadcasting to the masses on the late night radio beacon, which is Coast to Coast. How did you end up doing that job?
Well, it's a pretty amazing story, although it's a really short one. I got a call from them in 2005, and to just be a guest host. I had talked with a couple of people that I'd known. I hadn't seen one of my friends, in the broadcast business for 25 years.
Wow.
And we just went to lunch, and I said, he's the voiceover business has been my stock and trade for a long, long time. And I've probably sent more people running to either the head or the water faucet more than anybody you know, by the commercials that were running just continuously. And it was a really, really good run. But actually I began to, after having started off in music radio, I wasn't working with a crew anymore. You had to have an engineer back in the old days. Didn't
Right.
need one of those anymore. It's all computerized, and it's much simpler now. So I wound up spending several years with just an assistant. Then after a while, I didn't even need the assistant. And I thought, I really would like to connect with the roots of my career and do something a little different. And my friend said, well, you want to try some talk radio? And I was like, yes, I would. So the next thing I knew, I got a call saying, I talked to the man for a few minutes. He said, you know what, I'm just going to put you on Coast to Coast. Give it a whirl. And this went on for almost 6 years, just off and on. I mean, I didn't even hear from him for 2 years. And then I got a call from Lisa Lyon, the executive producer there, and said, would you like to do another show? Yes, I'd love to. And then in 2011, I started getting called quite a bit. I suppose the listeners responded positively to it, mostly. And then they offered me the Saturday position in December of 2011. And so here I am.
Now, you said that you started off doing some music radio. What were you doing, kind of like a disc jockey, just playing the music that you were into?
Yes, I had a similar experience with music radio. It was a big station in Dallas, Texas called The Zoo. The call letters were KZEW, although I think that belongs to another station in a much smaller metropolitan area now. And I went there as a part-timer. It was part-time for 3 months, and then I went 10 to 2 at night for 6 months, and then after that they pushed me into afternoon drive, and we did really amazingly well. I think the share was like 23.8 among men 18 to 34, so that scared everybody to death, of course, and then the guard changed, and I left and went full-time freelance voiceover from then on, and it worked out pretty well.
When you're doing the drive time down there in Texas, what type of subject matter were you doing? I'm gonna guess it may. Well, what type of subject matter were you handling? Was it coast to coast type stuff? Was it more music? Was it comedy? What type of genre?
I left that part out. Yeah, it was a rock and roll station, and that's all. I mean, it was one of those deals. Let me just make an adjustment here. That's better. It was one of those deals where lots of great music with a few witterings, and now it's the reverse of that. It's lots of witterings with a little bit of great music thrown in. So no, it was 50 songs every 4 hours. 4-hour shift, you'd play 50 songs.
See, we started off doing college radio for about
and
3.5
years.
It.
I mean, I was upstairs from Channel 8 television. Call letters are on that monster, or WFAA, and so that gave me an opportunity to. They were like, "Hey, why don't we get him to do some voiceovers for us?" So then I got pulled into the TV thing and got to learn up close and personal how major market television stations operate.
Now,
and also the culture within there. And, you learn of things like the lawyers that stand between the reporter and the airing of his story. And I've spent many years just observing these various systems, and now feel, after several decades of it, somewhat qualified to come on the air and talk about these things to those who are interested in listening to it.
Can you talk about that buffer zone where you knew what you wanted to say and then you were stopped and kind of censored on your way out to the airwaves? Because if there's a lot of people out there that kind of smell a rat in the mainstream media somewhere, but they don't really know what happens behind the scenes. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, let me be clear on that. Now, as far as the radio business was concerned, there was an AM and an FM upstairs, a television station downstairs, and across the driveway was the Dallas Morning News. This was owned by A.H. Belo Corporation. It was huge. Now, there was very little opportunity to... actually, I am credited somewhat with inventing the image liner. Now, you can say things like alive and beautiful music, XYZ, AM, whatever. Now, that's a bumper or a rejoinder, but I actually invented the image liner. I would take things from Ayn Rand or John Brunner or Anthony Burgess or somebody, and I would read these things and sort of weave them into the program. And that was about the extent of my influence as far as what I could say. As far as smelling a rat was concerned, I saw how, not at FAA, but at some of the other television stations who heard me on FAA, and let's get him to do this. Some of the stories that they wrote, I actually lost a few of those stations because the presentation for the story to come was so completely biased, either anti-gun or anti-this or anti-that, that I couldn't do it. I just told them I can't read this. You see, people think that I write this. It's not just that I say what you wrote. I actually have people believing that. I mean, they would call the station and tell them that we want to talk to that guy whose voice is on the air, like I had some power over what they put on the TV. It was ridiculous. But the biggest glaring stinkiness rat of them all, the size of a radioactively mutated nutria, would be when the Branch Davidian crisis occurred down in Waco, Texas. I'm watching the television, and I see the call letters of the station that I work for down in the lower right by a word that says live. And yet, as these tapes are being played, as this live transmission is coming into our television sets, I see edits in the tape, and I know an edit when I see one, and you do too.
Yeah.
And there was no there was no final cut or any of that. This was just a time delayed transmission, and anything unsavory or untoward regarding the authorities was just spliced out. Well, some years later, I got a hold of the uncut tapes, and I saw precisely what happened. For example, everyone remembers when the heavyset, all dressed in black SWAT guy is up on the roof, and he's yanking on this curtain, and a couple of guys have gone in ahead of him. He's yanking on that curtain. Then there's this glitch in what everybody saw, and the next thing you see are holes appearing in the wall next to the window where the other two SWAT men went in. And I'm thinking to myself, what in the world would make a hole shaped like that? Well, when I saw the other videotape, it's because the big guy threw a grenade in behind them. Now, I realize this sounds preposterous, but I'm telling you, I saw this, and I'm not the only one who saw it, because these videotapes were widely distributed, and many people saw it, but nothing ever happened. I also think it's interesting that McVeigh was just standing around out there later on at the Oklahoma City bombing the next year. Oh, just happen to have pictures of Tim McVeigh standing around, just like they just happen to have pictures of Lee Harvey Oswald with a photograph of him playing with his rifle in the backyard, and just happen to have film of him passing out pro-Cuban literature down in New Orleans. And to me, it's just, it's so ridiculously transparent now that, and I tell people, and I don't think this is going to help my career much, but you know what? You reach a stage in your life when you've been around long enough that you just really don't care. Now, some of the things I can discuss with you, I would not discuss on Coast, because it would be too much of a political bend to satisfy most of the listeners. They want paranormal, they want the ethereal, and we do cover a good bit of geopolitics, but they don't want anything that sounds pro-left or pro-right.
Right.
I've said on the air before, I am alternately left-wing, right-wing, Zionist, and Nazi. It just depends on what fragment of a sentence somebody heard me say, and then I'll get some scathing email, about 1 in 1,000. So you can't get them all, but you want to. I tell people, when you listen to a radio or a TV, you are listening to a machine. And in fact, I predict that in the future, the people that you're looking at and you think they're news anchors aren't actually even real people. It has been determined through some elaborate focus group what most people want to see and who they trust in a news presenter. And then through some very clever and ever-increasingly excellent graphics and three-dimensional composition, well, that'll be coming soon, you will see a humanoid that is in no way real. It will have been created based on the preferences of the viewing audience.
Well, we've seen some of the Japanese robots that are coming out that look pretty fantastic. I could imagine a robot anchor.
Well, yeah, and I mean, people would do well to remember that everything that you know of as being current technology is actually at least 30 and quite possibly as many as 40 years behind what really exists.
I just read a book on DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and it's pretty astounding.
Very serious.
It's very
very
interesting.
Serious people.
Yeah. I'm curious as to what they're working on with alternative energy. Being from Texas like you are, with oil being so important in an election year and being so important in a daily life at $4.50 a gallon, you just wonder, like you said, 20 or 30 years ahead, is this the best energy option that we have?
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, you're getting a call.
Apple computer. Sorry about that. My Apple computer just flipped out. Well, here's the thing. I'm wondering, where is, like Brian, in the broad strokes, this population, this civilization, this society has been deliberately and progressively dumbed down to where we can no longer be trusted with anything. Where is the individual air transportation? Where are these amazing devices? Where are all these cures for disease? We were well on our way to this, but right about the time Dwight Eisenhower left office, he said, now don't let the government and the money start sleeping together. If you do, you're going to have a problem. And now you got George Soros, and who is doing everything he can to manipulate the society right into right down the drain. This League of Cities. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, I think Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa, if he's not in charge of that, he's really high up there somewhere. That's in my backyard.
Yeah, it's not a good thing, and I mean, step by step, inch by inch, the socialistic, and of course socialism is only communism light. The only difference is that under communism you can't own private property, and largely that's about all there is. Now, if you have a small country like Austria or Denmark or one of them, it works pretty well because they have a pretty high gross domestic product, and not so many people. There are only 8 million people in the entire country of Austria, so it works pretty well. Your taxes are high, but everything's taken care of. But when you got a country with this many millions of people, 300 and some million people, there are going to be too many freeloaders. That's just how it is, and it's going to become a drag on the system. And the more you drag the individual citizen who is productive into that system, well, the less motivation there is for anybody to do anything. The alcoholism rate in Russia back in the Soviet Union days was somewhere around 90%, because there was just no reason to try. There was no future. It was only today, and today's just as boring as tomorrow's going to be. So I'm deeply concerned about the direction of the country, and because the direction of the country is, once these conspiracy theories become transparent, they cease to become theories, and they're just conspiracies.
Well, I think I believe you've interviewed Alex Jones. I think you've recently had him on Coast. Am I correct?
Yeah, just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, because he's somebody that always says something along the lines of, there's conspiracy theory, but when the theories are proven, they become conspiracy fact. And you're kind of starting to echo the same thing, because let me bring it back to Alex Jones there for a second, because if I recall as well, he said that it was the Branch Davidian thing that kind of woke him up, the whole McVeigh and Branch Davidian thing that got him active in, the new media, if you will. And why don't you talk for a minute about your relationship with Alex, because I know he's down there in Texas. You've had him on your program, and you guys were kind of woken up with roughly the same news stories that got you thinking outside the box and questioning things that you thought were reality.
Well, Alex's office called me one day and asked if I would come on his program. Of course, I was delighted to do this because I check into InfoWars a couple of times a day. And so we spoke about some things and found we were on the same page. And then I saw him at he happened to be in Dallas, and I was in Dallas, and he was at this little place called the Lakewood Theater, a really authentic 30s vintage theater. And Jim Mars was there and some other people. And the thing that was really disturbing is that, Alex, whenever he gives a live presentation like that, he's very, very passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of people that were really in support of this, and they're verbally they're excited and they're going like that. And I thought, this is almost a little bit. It's almost a little slightly alarming, because the very same things that he was talking about, however legitimate they may be, were the same things that other people were talking about back in the 30s over in Europe. And I thought, wow, isn't it interesting that it's only the intent that makes the difference between a real hardcore like Adolf Hitler was and people who was talking about freedom, the freedom of the German people and all of that. And, not all of the German people supported the Nazis, but all of the German people were punished once the Nazis drug the whole world into that war. On the other side of the coin, the desire for genuine freedom and the desire to move away from socialism. I mean, the Nazis were called National Socialist Workers' Party.
Right.
Socialism is not a good thing. And Alex is a champion of a constitutional republic. And that sort of passion is really necessary because otherwise no one's listening. They've been... we discussed this one night on Coast to Coast with Dr. George Hart about information diseases. We are being hit with so much information. We used to say, keep throwing stuff against the wall until something sticks.
Right.
But the problem is the more stuff you throw against the wall, the less of it sticks. And now people are just absolutely clueless as to who's actually telling them the truth. Alex, I'm sure, faces a constant tsunami of criticism over being, you're just a right-wing, clinging to your guns and your Bible like that, and you don't care about people. And nothing could be further from the truth. But that is the kind of criticism he faces. So, quite frankly, it's a pleasure for me to align myself with Alex because I feel the same way he does. We are very, very late in the game. And frankly, if someone were to say, okay, you got carte blanche, you just tell us what to do, and we'll execute your policies and straighten us up. And I'll tell you the truth, I would not be entirely sure where to begin. It is so completely convoluted. The media is so unreliable. It's like Alfred Hitchcock said on one of his programs, that our sponsors feel like, and our stations, our network, that's it. Our network feels that the average attention span of the viewer is no more than 15 minutes, and therefore they must be reminded of what station they are watching. And that's really true. I mean, how often do you need to be reminded what station you just put your finger on that button and selected a station? How many times do you need to be reminded what station you're listening to?
By the way, John, you're listening to the NewAmericanMedia.com. This is the Agree to Disagree program. Thank you very much for reminding me. And we're joined with John B. Wells. Twitter, we're more ADD than ever. We have 1,000 cable channels. Twitter's updating every 10 seconds. I think it's worse than it ever has been.
And I wonder how much communicating is actually being done. It's almost like we don't communicate large thoughts that stay with us or concepts that are sound that we carry with us and then weave them somehow into a code for living or conduct or even activity. We just get little bursts. We get little sound bites from the television and the radio when we hear our news, and we get little thought bites, just enough to turn you this way or that way. Just for a moment, and then it drops off. It burns off in a minute until the next little thought bite comes along. And I think we're dealing with a lot of confusion. It's very, very difficult to sort it out and even make a rational decision. If you go out there and ask somebody who's going to be president this time, or which one of the candidates do you like, they can't tell you. I mean, I haven't had one person tell me, I definitely want this guy, with the exception of Ron Paul supporters. And there's obviously something going on with him because he's either left out of some of these elections, or it's underreported, or when he's included, it's not reported, and there's clearly a concerted effort to keep him in the background. And the only reason I like Ron Paul is because he clings to the Constitution.
And he has a three-decade.
Now, go ahead.
No, he has a three-decade-long track record of at least some consistency. You can disagree with some of the policies, but you have 3 decades of consistent, principled voting record saying, well, look, if it's not in the minimal constraints outlaid in our Constitution, then I'm not for it. And people can pick apart his foreign policy and
I don't know what's wrong with this phone line, Brian, but it's dropping out, and I've lost you now.
Okay. Can you hear me at this point, sir?
You are back now, thank you.
Yes. Well, I was just saying about Ron Paul's consistency, and I think that when he's left out of the polling numbers and left out of stories, I think the mainstream media, I think it was ABC, just pulled their last embedded reporter with the Ron Paul campaign, and I think that tends to speak volumes.
Yes.
That speaks volumes toward, all right, if you're trying to make us not look here, I want to focus there a little bit more.
Well, you're going to have to repeat just the question, the part that you want to focus on, because for some reason this line's giving us a bad time. It's probably that pesky CIA again.
Well, I'll tell you what we could do. We're coming up against the commercial break, John.
Matter of fact, I can't. Yes, sir. You're there now. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Here's what I'll do. We're coming up against the commercial break. Why don't we run a batch of commercials here? Let's go ahead and we will reconnect with you on the other side of the commercial break and pick it up from there. Does that sound like a plan?
Thank you very much. Sorry about the technical glitch.
It's all good, John. We'll be right back. You are listening to John B. Wells, Saturday night host of Coast to Coast AM. We have definitely enjoyed listening to him over the past couple of months. He will come right back on the other side of this quick commercial break. This is Brian Engelman. You are listening to Agree to Disagree on the NewAmericanMedia.com.
You are listening to the Agree to Disagree program on the NewAmericanMedia.com.
Hi, Brian from the NewAmericanMedia.com. Last year I had this idea. I wanted to start a website of my own, not just something, a presence on Twitter, a presence on Facebook, and have a thing. I wanted a website. I wanted a home base for all of the ideas and things I'm interested in. I wanted live radio. I wanted to communicate with the globe. I was tired of being spoon-fed dogma by corporate interests and just, here, believe this, believe this. I said, no, I think there's something underneath the surface, but I didn't know how to do it. So I contacted Ted Distel of DistelDesign.com. Ted walked us through the process of, okay, you want videos, you want to do quotes of the day, you want to have a spiritual section, you want to have a 1984 watch where government's intruding and private corporations are intruding into your privacy. Yeah, those are the things that I was interested in. Ted walked me through the process. We built thenewamericanmedia.com, and I encourage you to go online and take a look at our site. That's what he's capable of. Please, if you have an idea, go to disteldesign.com. That's DISTEL design.com.
Have you ever considered adopting a pet to be part of your family? Our animal companions can be just as close to us as our human companions. If you're considering adoption, please visit your local shelter and adopt a pet today. Shelter pets make the best pets.
Follow the NewAmericanMedia.com on Twitter at American_media_.
Hi, it's Brian from the NewAmericanMedia.com. I'm a sports fan. I was raised in Cleveland, spent 25 years in Ohio. I watched The Drive, The Fumble, The Shot too. I watched Art Modell steal the Cleveland Browns and win a Super Bowl over in Baltimore. I watched a horrible coach named Bill Belichick go on to the Patriots and win Super Bowls over there. Hooray. I am a bitter sports fan. Let's not even talk about what happened with he who shall not be named, who went to South Beach to take his talents there. Excuse me, I almost threw up in my mouth a little bit there. I'm a sports fan who cares to talk about the things that matter to me. That is the Indians, the Cavs, the Browns, and the Buckeyes. But of course, I pay attention to national sports, and we discuss that on our show as well. That's why we have The Unhappy Hour every single Friday at 3:30 p.m. Pacific. Sit down, have a drink. It's the end of a long work week, and we can all get together and talk about the unhappy times that we've had as sports fans. We've all had them. We've had ups and downs, but as Cleveland fans, we only have downs. Join us.
You are listening to the Agree to Disagree program on the NewAmericanMedia.com.
Hello, everybody. We are back. Thank you very much for joining us. This is the Agree to Disagree program. I'm your host, Brian Engelman. We were speaking with John B. Wells, who is the Saturday night host of Coast to Coast AM. Having a bit of a telephone glitch, so we're going to try to reconnect right now. Reset this conversation.
Well,
Hey, John, it's Brian with the New American Media again. Can you hear me
Brian.
now just fine?
okay. Yes, absolutely.
Perfect.
Yep.
Well, thank you for joining us again. By the way, John, would you like to tell everybody about, I don't know, if you have an upcoming guest or two coming up, maybe this weekend or next, that you want to let people know about on Coast, and tell them about your Caravan to Midnight site?
Oh, sure. Let me see here. Well, now this weekend, let me get my glasses on here. We have Christopher Valentine, and also who's the man that's going to be with him? Christopher Valentine and Dr. Christian von Lahr, and we're going to discuss. These are both writers, mystical beings. So it's St. Patrick's Day, right? So
Leprechauns?
we're going to do leprechauns and mystical beings. I'm not kidding you. It's,
Nice.
Apparently, Christopher Valentine's an author and proficient nature spirit communicator, so this ought to be a good one. But then after that, we will talk to Dr. Gary Ridenour. He has written a book called Pandemic, and it's not a very thick book, but is a very, very serious book, and it goes all the way back to the big influenza epidemic of the first part of the last century that killed, in fact, some of his relatives as well, and was the driving force behind his lifelong pursuit in medicine. And this avian flu is a very, very serious thing, and some people may be weaponizing it, and it's just an awful thing for which we are completely unprepared. And so that'll be this. So we'll keep it light for a minute, and we'll have our Irish whiskey, and then we'll steady our nerves so we can talk about the pandemic that may come to visit us. May the Lord forbid. As far as Caravan to Midnight is concerned, this is a site that I put together that when the Fukushima thing occurred last year, I went down to my aircraft hangar, which is my mad scientist laboratory, and looked for this old Geiger counter that I had down there. It's as big as a toaster. And I thought, there's got to be something a little bit better than this. And the company that made it's not even in business anymore. So I couldn't find any that were available. So I got a hold of some friends in Western Europe, and they got a hold of some of their friends in Eastern Europe. And we got some Russian radiation detectors, which we offer on the site, and also links to. It's not an official extension of Coast to Coast by any means, but from the host page, if you go to the coasttocoastam.com website and click on hosts, and you click on my name, then down at the bottom of the right there, that just goes on endlessly. I may have to edit that. There's a link to the site there, and there will be books, and we have water purification devices, and there are some devices coming that will cancel out electromagnetic radiation around about a 30-foot radius from wherever you are, a little USB-powered thing, and just stuff like that. In Texas, there has been a lot of misinformation.
Let me jump in there. Can you explain that one more time? You said about a 20-foot radius. It'll protect you from. Did you say electromagnetic? Repeat that for me.
I haven't received it yet, but these guys that are looking into it said no, this thing really works. It emits something. I do not have the technical specs, but it emits something that cancels or makes a little, almost a Faraday's cage to where the electromagnetic radiation. Now, if you're sitting next to a computer, it's not going to do that, but it will interfere with electromagnetic radiation that is outside this 30-foot radius, and keep it away from you.
All right. Well, then make me a deal on that. Make me the promise that when you get that and you get to play around with it and you get to understand the specs a little bit, I want to talk to you a little bit more about that, because EMP is something, after I read the book 1 second after, it had me really, really thinking about how vulnerable, how feeble, the fact that humanity, with 7 billion people on this planet, we think everything is easy, and you just flip a light switch and get electricity, turn a tap and you get water, and that food just arrives at the grocery store. But that's really not the way things work. And if you were to just flip the switch for 3 days, it would be absolute chaos in this country. Can you talk about the concept of prepping? Because I guess it really ties into your website, caravantomidnight.com.
It does, and this website is in its infancy. These are just devices that, as long as you can find batteries to put in them, then you'll be fine with that.
Right.
But I believe that a lot of people who feel like, back when I was a kid, there was a thing that had Ward Cleaver on there. I don't remember the actor's name, and he was talking with the children about, well, if the atomic bomb comes, we'll just go down into the shelter. Then we'll come out after a couple of days and start cleaning up. everything will be fine. All of these, if you'll excuse the expression, green-toothed bubbas with their MREs and their deer rifles, I predict that half of them will be dead at the end of 6 weeks. You're not going to make it out there. People do not realize how many things there are out there that will get you. We have anthrax deaths every year. That stuff lives in the soil. So if you find yourself oh, your sleeping bag's wet, and you go down to sleep on the wrong piece of dirt, you're liable to inhale that stuff and wind up with a case of anthrax. We have managed to eradicate many of the diseases that plague this nation for the better part of half a century. Well, for 200 years almost. But they're coming back, and when they come back, they're antibiotic resistant. I mean, what are you going to do if you catch some sort of a flu when you're out there in the sticks because you've decided to flee the city and you managed to do that? Well, now what are you going to do? How are you going to eat? So, really, I have to put it this way, and there's no other way to put it. You need this. You need God, grub, gear, guns, and maybe even some guts. And that's the only thing that's going to get you through. And in my opinion, I mean, call me a Southern Bible thumper. I'm not. I'm an observer. I've observed human behavior for many decades now. And faith is what's going to get you through this better than anything else. You cannot prepare for every contingency, but you can put a food supply together, the proverbial bug-out bag, and with enough to tide you over for a couple of weeks. And that's about the best you can do because we are our lives are inextricably linked. Example, here's a disaster scenario for you, a very quick one. What do you think would happen if the truckers, all of a sudden, everybody got mad who's driving truck, across the country, delivering this stuff? What if they just get sick of these fuel prices and decide to just pull it over? Those grocery stores will be empty inside of 48 hours. Empty. If there's a radiological event, going back to Caravan to Midnight, Dr. Michael McDonald, he's head of the Global Health Initiative, wrote a scathing report on the total woeful lack of preparedness in this country for any kind of a radiological event. If it's anything of significance, you're not going to find anybody at the hospital. They're going to head for the hills with everybody else. Those who remain, if they know where the Geiger counter is, they probably don't know how to use it or how to read it or anything else. So the gear that I sell on this thing is not to make me money. I mean, if we make a little money, fine. That'll cover the overhead. But all we do with the money that we get is we roll it over into more stock. And it really is more of a public service than some sort of a capitalistic venture. I mean, I'd love to sell 1 million of them. That'd be great. But the fact is that there's no place to run to. There's no place to run. We just got a report that the background radiation in Los Angeles is 3 times higher than it's supposed to be. That's because all that stuff from Japan is finally making its way over here. I mean, and they're not going to tell you. What did the EPA do? They raised the level. They raised the acceptable level of background radiation. Oh, well, it's coming up to our chins. Well, that's okay. We'll just move the safety bar up to our chin level, and we're good. No, we're not good. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to straighten out this government, and that's going to take some doing because these people are not going to go easy. This border needs to be shut. I have compassion for all people. I don't care if it's the poorest person in black Africa or a Mexican who's just trying to support his family and trying to come over into this country and get something going on because his own country is just turned into a cesspool. I understand this. But I also understand that if you try and apply emotional solutions to logistical problems, you're going to fail, and in the end, you're going to have chaos. The first thing we need to do is cordon off our country and insist that people do things the right way. I challenge anybody to go to Mexico with no documentation. We'll be waiting for about 5 years before we find out maybe where you are, let alone what you went through by going illegally into Mexico. Well, it's the same sauce for the goose as the gander. If other nations can be strict about their immigration policy, so can we. Do I understand children were born here and this is their home? Yes. Do I understand there are unpleasant consequences if your parents break the law? Yes. It's going to be unpleasant, but it has to be done because otherwise we'll have eventually the same chaos here that's in Mexico.
Well, you know,
that's just how it is.
We had the opportunity a couple weeks ago. We spoke with Buddy Roemer, former governor of Louisiana. He's running for president on a third party. And we talked a little bit about how what our country needs right now is a football coach to get everybody playing under the same system, for the same team, for the name on the front of the jersey, not the name on the back. And it doesn't matter what you look like, what school you came from, any of your background or history, what religion you're into, sexual preference, none of that stuff matters. A good football coach will get everybody playing on the same team to win. And I just feel like I've seen so many different administrations dividing us.
You just dropped off again.
Yeah, I'm still here if you can hear me. I am still here, John. Can you hear me,
You
sir?
are here.
Okay.
Can you believe this is happening? Yeah, go ahead about Buddy Romer.
Well, at this point, I would be surprised if our phones weren't cutting out. I've had enough odd things happen to me over the past 9 years. Wait, how long has the Patriot Act been? 10 years? Something like that.
Yeah.
Well, I was just saying with Buddy Romer, we talked about a good football coach will get all your players playing on the same team. And right now...
Brian.
Yeah.
No, well, I was watching Brave. Go ahead and finish your thought. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, the point
Right
is we need to unite the country instead of divide us through socioeconomic bracket, through sexual preference, through through personal choices and decisions. Any of this stuff, we're just being divided, and we're being very we're vulnerable. We're weakening ourselves from the inside, and it's very dangerous to do that. I think I would fire any football coach that divides the locker room.
You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. While we're busy here calling each other left, right wing, gay, straight, the activity that we need to worry about is happening behind our backs. While we're busy dealing with this, people like Soros are going behind your back and going to these little individual municipalities and just taking one civil right away from you after another, one amendment to the Constitution after another is being, he's trying to cancel it out. I mean, the guy said that bringing America down would be the culmination of his life's work. I mean, this is a guy who was helping load Jewish people into cattle cars, so to speak, and loading their property off onto trucks, and he had no problem with it at all, and in an interview he expressed no remorse. These are the people, after you've had all the money in the world, the only thing left is power. And that's what these people are, power junkies with the morality of a puff adder. And Buddy Romer is absolutely right. I saw Braveheart the other night. I didn't watch it all the way through because I know how it ends. But he's in there and he was telling Robert the Bruce, you've got to unite the clans. And to the old man up at the front, he said, you think that the people exist to give you position. It's your duty to give the people freedom. But that's what we have. We have politicians now who feel like our only purpose is to give them position. And we need to get rid of this. We need to throw about 90% of these fools out. Put them on a list and don't ever permit them to hold public office ever again.
Well, let's jump in there because George Soros is the man who infamously broke the Bank of England. He set his sights on the United States to short our country essentially. I don't know when financial terrorism becomes something that the NDAA has to consider, but we've gone down a path where there is something called the NDAA where people could just be taken, black-bagged off of the streets as a U.S. citizen without a trial, without a charge, and it just seems like if McCain was behind the scenes responsible for this passing, and it's approved by Obama, it doesn't seem like we have a choice in this country that the right and left, Republican, Democrat, it's two sides of the same coin, and we're all being told a bunch of lies.
Well, we are, and for the record, I admire John McCain's service to our country. I admire his bravery in sitting through several years of imprisonment as a POW by the North Vietnamese. But I'll also tell you that I don't trust John McCain as far as I can throw a 1,500-pound bull by his tail. He just vacillates too much. I don't like this. And some of the things I see him do are absolutely beyond the pale of anything I thought somebody who purports to take the position that he does regarding our constitutional republic, not a democracy. That's not what this is. I don't understand him. Sometimes I think he left half of his mind in Southeast Asia. I really do. I'm sorry, but that's really how I feel. I've reached that point in my life where I really don't much care what comes out of my mouth now, because either say it now or forever hold your peace. And I think that people out in the audience would do well to understand that one day, if these people get their way, you and I will no longer be able to have these conversations. They will be forbidden, and if we have a conversation like this where the public has access to it, we'll be arrested, and no one will see us again. It's happened before, and if you think it can't happen here, you're wrong. It can, and it is happening here.
Well, earlier you mentioned one of the candidates, Ron Paul, and you
Yes.
also mentioned earlier some grub and some guts, but I didn't hear you mention gold. If it was in there, I might have missed it. But let's talk for a minute about gold and silver being the currency we're supposed to use. The fact that our Congress is supposed to coin our currency, and the fact that for the past 100 years we've been off that path a little bit, and there only seems to be one candidate addressing this, because once you control the money, it doesn't matter who the politicians are. Can you talk a little bit about the currency crash that we're feeling through $4.50 a gallon gas or $200 for a couple bags of groceries? It's called inflation and it's theft. Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Brian, the only way that I could address that is to just put it this way, and this may seem like I'm going around it, but I'm really not. The only thing left for them to do, I mean, given I heard when Germany was reunited, and I say Germany because they're a European country, they were an advanced civilization, and they descended into just this god-awful chaos and dragged the rest of the world in there with them. When that country was split down the middle, and the East Germans had to live under that Soviet oppression for so many years, I heard the West Germans, once the wall came down, several of them say, yeah, but they are good engineers. They are still Germans, you know. All right, fine. Now, when you go outside, because they always maintained their national pride, but when you go over to some of the other Eastern European countries, they're not able to produce like a Germany can or like a, or like a U.S. can. Certainly not like a China can. They can't do it. So, if the bankers truly run the world, and they do, what is the way to? I know. Let's just pull everybody into a global economy. I mean, all this fair trade, we proudly support fair trade. It's like you can live like a king down there for $100 a month, but you want to pay them according to what it takes to live for a month in the U.S.? Well, if you do that enough, what you've done is you've taken all of this money, all of the available money, and I'll get back to gold here in a second. Take all this money, spread it all out. Jack and Jill are in a can, and they have a child. They tear off a little piece of each of their dollars, give it to the child. Another child comes along and tear off another little piece. You spread this all out all over the world, and then they just get to suck the same money out from the entire world rather than just this country or that country. Right now, what we're experiencing is what I call economy rotation. First, the U.S. was blowing and going. Then Japan starts blowing and going. Then Europe started blowing and going. Then America again. Now it's China. So these guys are really, really smart. They understand that this money that they keep talking about doesn't even exist, which brings us back to gold. Two things on that. Number one, I have no idea how much of a gold supply there even is in the world. There are rumors that there's nothing in Fort Knox and hasn't been for some time. And then you hear, China's buying gold. Well, if it comes down to a Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome kind of a deal or a Road Warrior deal, people are going to, are you going to trade them a gold bar for a box of 9mm? You bet, except for one thing, they don't want the gold bar. They need that knife or that box of food that you have. I mean, people need to understand that evolved, highly developed civilizations have been reduced to borderline savagery within memory of people still alive today. It has happened before, and it will happen again. The Vedics say if a thing happens once, it may never happen again. If it happens twice, it most certainly will happen a third time. It's going to happen. If we don't get a hold of this thing right now, get rid of these. Do you know how many Wall Street people are in the Obama administration? It's stuffed with Wall Street people.
The important ones?
On Wall Street? I mean, it drives me nuts, Brian, and I realize this is your show, and I'm talking through most of it here, and thank you for that, but it makes me wonder what is wrong with everybody, and why do they feel so completely helpless? Well, most of them don't even know who their state representatives are. They don't know who their senators or congressmen are. Have no idea. So what do we do about that? I mean, if I read an article in Omni magazine a long time ago, I'm talking like 40 years, and it was talking about someone was invading the town, the soldiers came, but we didn't care, and this and that happened, and we didn't care. And it was some sort of a treatment that the military was working on where they could actually induce apathy among a section of a city. Just hit them with a ray or hit them with a gas, or it explored many medias for accomplishing this. And that's what we have here. I mean, the CIA wants to spy on you through your television set. That's a report on a story on Drudge Report today. It's just beyond. It's like Dr. Joseph Mengele said: the more we do to you, the less you can believe that we are doing it to you. That's Joseph Mengele, that monstrous doctor that was sewing twins together just to see how it went, and injecting people in the heart with phenol to see what happened. This guy was a freak. I mean, he was treating human beings like some mean little kid on the playground with a magnifying glass over by the ant bed. He was just a monster. But that's what he said. The more we do to you, the less you can believe we're doing it to you. Well, they are doing it to us. Look at all these people flipping out all over the place. Now, Chuck E. Cheese has become the brawling spot of choice across the country. But then again, this is based on what? One story, one report. Then I say it to you, it goes out to your audience, and that's what they hear. Now, do I know for a fact that there is more violence at Chuck E. Cheese than anywhere else? No, not really. I just read a report. So which reports are valid and which ones are not? So the first thing we have to do is we have to limit the amount of information that we get, and the information that we do receive needs to be accurate.
Where are some? I'm sorry, not to interrupt where you said the problem was.
No, go ahead, please do. Why don't you just keep going? Why
don't you recommend a couple of places? Like you said, you check in with InfoWars a couple of times a day. Where else do you check in for some news on the important issues you care about?
Oh, good Lord. Well, I check here for one thing, and then there's a little thing. Now, I wish they would not use off-color language, because to me, any off-color language really sort of prejudices the intelligence of the writer. You know, I don't want to see WTF. I don't want to see any of that. I really don't. It's almost like Southern accents. You speak in a Southern accent, and half the world thinks you're a moron. But Full Spectrum Dominance is a good site. The reason that I like Drudge Report is because of the newspapers and media outlets that are on the left column. You can get everybody there: Pravda, TASS. You can get all the UK newspapers. You can get German newspapers and Australian newspapers. Once you start looking at these things, you begin to see patterns of reporting. So it becomes easier to weed out what's, just fluff, or what's actually something that's going to amount to something as time goes by. I mean, I read that the island of Grenada, it was like a 3-line deal in the newspaper way back on page 50 or whatever, that said that the island of Grenada was now open to Soviet and Cuban air traffic. And I thought, oh boy, you're going to be hearing more about that in the near future. And we eventually did send a bunch of Marines down there to take care of things, rescue those students. So the thing to do is just troll. You click on one of these links, it takes you to a story. Well, maybe you're not all that interested in that story, but you see another link, and you take that, and it takes you to an entirely different media outlet. So you just have to have the willingness to look. It's not like I'm going to push this one button and there's going to be my bona fide news right there. This is absolutely the truth. No, you have to determine that for yourself.
Yeah, it's almost like shopping for a used car. You want to hit up a couple lots to kind of get a gauge of the market. You got to kind of get what's going on here. And one of the best teachers we had in my college experience, he said two things. Number one, and this was the most popular teacher on campus. He said, the two biggest pieces of advice I could give you are watch the movie Pi many times and listen to Coast AM. And that was kind of one of the things I started doing about 15 years ago that really, through Art Bell and George, and now hearing someone like you up on there, because you have a passion about feeling things are wrong and trying to do whatever you can to speak the truth as you see it and hash it out where you're incorrect and not be afraid of sounding silly, because there's a lot of people that don't even get into the conversation because they don't want to be they don't want the intimidation, they don't want to say something that could be taken out of context, and people are scared to talk right now. So we certainly appreciate what you guys are doing, because Coast to Coast is one of the places we've found quite a bit of interesting news over the past decade and a half. Can you tell us about what it's been like for the past 3 months working over at Coast to Coast on Saturday nights? And is it what you were expecting, and has anything surprised you?
It's everything that I was hoping for, and much more than I expected. There is no lawyer between me and that microphone. If I say something brilliant, well, that's the Lord's doing. If I go on the air and say something stupid, well, that's all on me, and the responsibility and the consequences will follow me for it as well.
Yeah.
So you don't want to alienate anybody, but you do want to get your message out there. And because I have this proclivity for controversy, shall we say, they are willing to let me talk with people that a lot of people would not want to talk to. This fellow John Skura, who with his partner Dane Phillips wrote this book, Battle Hymn, it put a knot in my stomach for 3 days, and I'm not weak-stomached. I mean, he went through everything from the Trilateral Commission to the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderbergers, and blah, 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 all the way through, and it's undeniable. And then Captain Philip Marshall wrote a deal on the 9/11 attacks called the book on the 9/11 attacks called The Big Bamboozle. And you start reading this stuff, and you say, now, how can this just continue to be ignored by mainstream media? And it's the same thing. It's the same theory. The people are too stupid. We need to control what they hear. We need to control what they see. Just going back to what John Lennon wrote, keep you doped with religion and sex and TV. And that's what they do. And that's pretty much it.
Well, you were saying
I'm
saying that we don't even know who our representatives are, but you can tell us which reality star is pregnant. You can say who had the yellow dress at the Oscars. You can talk about who won Dancing with the Stars and all of this nonsense. We're paying attention to the exact wrong stuff. We're completely distracted.
It's the same thing that people do when they take drugs or they drink heavily. They're trying to escape. They're trying to get just out of it. The problem is what makes them depressed eventually is that drugs and alcohol do one thing. In fact, the Japanese did a study on drowning your sorrows. You're not drowning them. You're hardwiring them. You'll never get over that thing that you think you're drowning. It is just being embedded deeper and deeper and deeper into your conscious and your subconscious, which is even worse. And you will continue to drink, addressing that problem, and you will never get rid of it. And that's what we do with our television shows. It's literally mind candy. Ray Bradbury, I was honored to interview him one night after going back and rereading Fahrenheit 451. And I would recommend that everybody, you think you remember the story maybe, but go back and read Fahrenheit 451 and then check the copyright date on it and see what a visionary Ray Bradbury was, or still is. He's still alive, thank God. Big screen interactive TVs on the wall, discouraging people from talking on their front porches and getting to know each other and exchanging ideas and so forth, while all the time there's another war coming. And
it sounds just like 1984. Sounds like 1984, and Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged. It's this written in 1957. It's the same story that's going on today.
Well, yes, and I mean, you get a bunch of people out there. Let's change gears for a second. They're talking about the framers of the Constitution, calling them old white guys. It's like Benjamin Franklin was the oldest signer there. He was 70, but there were men there in their 30s. I think Jefferson was 33. Either Jefferson or Adams was 31, 33 years old, something like that. They were all ages. They weren't a bunch of old men deciding what the youthful people who have all the brilliant ideas, as we all know. I mean, did we have a lot of brilliant ideas when we were young? No. We came to have some as we studied stuff written by what? Older guys and girls. And these people like Ayn Rand and many other, Orwell and Huxley, these people were geniuses. And they were telling us, John Malthus, I mean, that's a little extreme, but in a way, John Malthus was right. It's like human beings are just so messed up. They really are just a bunch of lemmings, and look at the way they act. I mean, who would imagine that the world leaders, Brian, are more childish in their behavior than any child you've ever seen? They squabble with each other, and then what a circus it is. It's like, oh, they're enemies. The Republicans and the Democrats, they're just hardcore enemies. They're ideological foes. Yeah, well, when the camera's off of them and somebody gets their iPhone or their Droid in there with the camera, you see them hugging each other and having a drink.
Having martinis, dining at the same table. I've heard Jesse Ventura say that when he got behind the scenes. It's just like WWF. It's your enemies on stage while you're acting, and then you get back to what you're really doing.
We were given a chance with some real statesmen. I mean, they offered George Washington. They said, George, you could become king real easy. And he's like, no, that's not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to become a king. So he was a man of character. We need men and women of character.
And you know what
Surely.
Washington's quote was? He said, "Don't think I just fought a war so that I could become King George the First over here against King." It just didn't make sense that you're going to fight a King George over there so that he can become a King George over here. And it was a man of character.
Yes, he was. And there are people of character out there. But the thing is, why would these people, unless they had a sense of civil responsibility, why would they want to wade into that cesspool? Every aspect of your life is open. Your tax returns, your social life, any funny pictures you took when you were a kid at some frat party or something. All of this is open for public inspection now. Why would anybody want this? Anybody with any intelligence would want to run like hell from something like that, not run toward it. But alas, as I said earlier, our lives are inextricably linked, and we need leaders to come forward and take control of this thing, or we are lost. We will simply be tossed like a piece of trash on the ocean.
Well, that was my final question that I had lined up for you, because we're about out of time here. But I was going to ask, we're not quite in politics. You and I are both in broadcasting and telling stories and learning from other people. Why do you do what you do? Because in the realm of media, you have to have a drive, you have to have a motivation, and it's not politics where you stand up and have everything thrown at you. But you're watching now with Rush Limbaugh, with MSNBC, with Fox, with Michael Moore. You're seeing this blur between entertainment and politics because it's kind of the same stuff. Look at the Colbert Report, the Daily Show. It's becoming the same infotainment thing. What gets you up out of bed, and what is your motivation to get on the airwaves like you do? What gets you going?
The possibility that I can dump a load of unmentionable bull-based plant fertilizer on the deserving, just to send a message that we're watching you. I like to think that I say things I say things that other people are thinking, but they have the discretion to keep quiet about it. I do not have that discretion, because to me it's nothing but a limiter. I am not a conservatist necessarily. I'm not an anti-conservatist. I'm not an anti-liberalist. I'm an anti-stupidist. And if it's stupid, then I want to attack it. Oh, well, that's your opinion that it's stupid. Yes. Well, we're all entitled to our opinion. Yes, and some opinions are more valuable than others. So I try to do some research. I like to be around people who are smarter than I. I like to talk to specialists, get their perspective, because just to summarize, the whole story doesn't come from Channel 1 or Channel 7 or Channel 3. A little bit comes from each one of those channels. And you put all those little pieces together, and then maybe you can see the truth. But what we're faced with now is a big jigsaw puzzle. We have a box of pieces, but not all of those pieces go to this puzzle that we're trying to make. So first we have to get the useless pieces out, then decide, okay, these are the pieces that go to the puzzle, and then assemble it. And it's a job. And you can't do it all in one show or in 1 year or maybe even in one lifetime. But if I can inspire somebody to where, if they get rid of me, I mean the guy in the black suits with the black ties, okay. Well, maybe somebody else will be inspired to take over, because just as long as you can look evil in the face and let it know, I'm watching you, I see you, then you've got a chance at defeating it. But if you just whistle down the road like everything's fine, you're going to have it behind you, and the next thing you're going to feel is a steel in your back.
Well,
how it is in my world.
One of the quotes that we got when we told people we'd be talking with you, somebody commented, "Well, he's my new favorite host on Coast to Coast." So, what you are doing is resonating with people out there. I can tell you, we've listened for the past few months. We have it used to be Streamlink, now it's Coast Insider, where you can get all the podcasts and listen all day long whenever you have time. And we've really enjoyed your shows, and we'd like to let you know that you have an open invite to come back over here, because it's all about us standing up and speak now, forever hold your peace. If we don't get another chance to be this free and open, how much are we going to regret the missed opportunity we left on the table? So that's why we do what we do, and we'd love to have you back sometime in the future, John.
I'd love to do it, Brian. Thank you very much. As Zapata said, better to die on your feet than to live on your knees.
And with that, That is a good one, and it is the truth, because at the end of the day, if we have to answer to a maker, and that maker may or may not say to us, well, what did you do to stop it? I don't want to stutter. I don't want to have to think for words or lie. I just want to say I did what I knew how to do, and that's to communicate, that's to talk, and to connect with people like you, and send it out to our Twitter followers, and put it up on YouTube, and get this stuff going around, and just keep searching for the truth. John, thank you very much for your time tonight, sir.
Brian, keep fighting the good fight.
All right, you as well. Thanks, John. That was John B. Wells. He is the Saturday night host of Coast to Coast AM. We've been big fans of Coast to Coast AM since we started listening about 15 years ago. George Norrie, Ian Punnett, George Knapp, all those guys, Art Bell, and now John B. Wells. We hope to be speaking with him more in the future. Thank you for joining us today on Agree to Disagree. My name is Brian Engelman. This is the new AmericanMedia.com. Thank you very much.